Hello everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals. It is February the 1st, 2022, and I'm headed to the Friedrich Wilderness area to see what kind of wilderness that I can encounter. In more and more of my recent journeys, the wilderness that I've been encountering is more of the domesticated type of wilderness. As a friend of mine pointed out in the past, we are nature as well. And I used to always talk about just loving to take pictures of nature and how it was sometimes challenging to take pictures of people. Like, for an example, I would have felt maybe a little bit uncomfortable being hired to photograph a wedding party, just as an example. Because something like that, even though I'm the one taking pictures, it just feels, it used to feel uncomfortable in the past. I don't know if it still would. I know that in the past it was just something that seemed a little bit unnatural to have someone there who is observing but not really observing. And by that, what I mean is, when we're looking through a lens to take pictures or video, we're observing, but we're adding a layer of separation to that which we would have been observing without the camera gear. So the same way that I'm talking with you in a video format, in a way that you're hearing my words, but you're not necessarily seeing what's going on in front of me. Like just a while ago, I was approaching a green light and a vehicle had to come to a complete stop, the vehicle in front of me, because some youth decided to walk across the street against the do not walk sign that they were being presented with. The reason they would have a do not walk sign is because, well, if the oncoming traffic light is green, then essentially you would be putting your life at risk by walking through that intersection when it wasn't the right time. So in a lot of ways, hearing a conversation from someone who's having to pay attention to the traffic, and by traffic that includes pedestrian traffic, that I'm seeing and encountering, you might feel like you were a layer removed from the conversation. Like what I'm talking about might just seem absolutely abstract. Like it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense why this guy Ray continues to point out the beautiful sun that's overhead. You can see it. And I'm seeing that mostly because occasionally I'll look at towards this video screen and see what's in the screen. So in addition to all of the processing of what I'm seeing in front of me, the traffic lights that I stop for, the pedestrian traffic that doesn't stop for their traffic lights, the vehicles that stop for the pedestrian traffic who didn't stop for their traffic lights, the inadvertent lack of consideration for one another as we pilot our time machines through this beautiful terrain. All of these things are things that might seem unimpressive to the closed-minded. To the person whose ears are open and who's hearing this, I believe you're receiving a wealth of knowledge, because if I go back and play any of these episodes myself, and I do on occasion have to do that when I'm editing the video to include pictures from the day's walk, for an example, which this video will also include. As I'm doing these things, I'm appreciating that I remember details from the past, like my friend saying, people are nature as well. And so I'm sharing that knowledge for anyone out there who has been in a position where maybe they've never photographed a wedding before, or when they have, they didn't feel like getting in that other person's field of view who already was sitting in the perfect spot to watch the live event that was occurring. A lot of us are really caught up in the past and the future, so much so that we may not even acknowledge that we're obstructing someone else's ability to move forward, progress. If we're obstructing somebody's progress, sometimes that comes from the sheer aspect of being the traffic that's on the road to begin with. And so sometimes as I round a bend at the speed limit and notice a vehicle was about to come out from the intersection, and then they see you at the last second and come to a stop, as I see these things happen, I also recognize more and more that it seems as if our people are not quite always paying attention. It's not until most people pay that they begin to pay any attention. So let's just give one random example in today's society of the wise and the not as wise who are currently coexisting on this planet right now. With some of the more advanced, the more wise people who are in this world, I've presented a scenario where one of the more wise people, I'm using the word wise when literally I mean older. Some of our older people have committed acts that seem like they should not go unchallenged. They've committed acts such as arson. And they've committed arson without having any kind of ramifications. There were no penalties for burning the house down. And because there were no penalties for burning the house down, they may not have paid attention to the fact that the crosswalk did not say walk now. They might not have felt any concern that they went against the traffic sign. And it might also be because they've done it many times before, never once having been struck by the realization that paying attention is optional in this world. And in a lot of cases, we have had things so structured that we don't necessarily have to pay attention to survive in this world. As I'm driving, I'm seeing aluminum cans, plastic bottles, strips of rubber, things from our existence, from our constant being in this traffic. I also have added to the volume of traffic of evidence that mankind was here to begin with. The untold number of bottle caps that I also have put into the system are quite daunting when I think about it, and when I think about, wow, how do I go back? If I could go back and take back some of that which I did in the past errantly, like let's say walking across a crosswalk without seeing that it wasn't my turn, maybe I would not have been struck by the imminent consideration, the eventual consideration that should have been my primary consideration. Maybe I would have thought first about applying the logic that's necessary before just errantly continuing on without actively thinking about what it was I was doing. So this channel is strictly about being aware for the purpose of being aware. If you hear somebody say something like, this is how I spell my name, or this is where my mail should go to this address and not the other, because it's like, if we can then know that what we're saying to one another is being paid attention to, if we can know that there is traffic behind us at the same time as there's no traffic in front of us, if we can be aware when we are the obstacle, then we also can be aware as to when that lane next to us opens up, when we can move over and get out of somebody's way. This channel is about being aware, becoming aware, first of all. Some of us were not aware at all. And once we become aware, to make better decisions. A lot of everything that's on this whole channel, whether it's the beautiful content I've brought to you about things that have literally come from the ocean to become jewelry, to things that are strewn about the highway, which can become something useful. There's a vulture on the light. I don't know. I doubt. Well, I can't tell now. Maybe it did show up on the back window down here. In a nutshell, to be aware of the wildlife around us in this sea of chaos, where we have so much fodder, if that's the word, where we have so much material, man-made material and scenarios passing us by, to be able to be aware that nature might be on the decline might only come from someone who was aware of it at all to begin with. Are any of you fans of nature out there? Are any of you who are listening to this hearing that I'm probably one of the biggest fans of Mother Nature in the world? As far as my own benchmark is, I'm sure that there are professionals who are working in the industry who are bigger fans and well more versed in the way of nature than I am. And at the same time, I'm going to be walking on this trail in the Friedrich Wilderness area to give a demonstration in this video clip that you're watching of whether I saw more wildlife or more wild life. To me, it'd be pretty wild to go out into a trail and throw a bottle or a bottle cap into the equation. Now, we know that there's probably a fraction of people who accidentally drop the item. And then the item, which again is comprised of plastic bottle, usually the softer, flimsier plastic wrapping that goes around the bottle that's embossed with the name of the corporation who put that product together. The plastic bottle cap, which is a different opacity, a different level of opaque. And also the plastic ring that goes to the bottle cap. The plastic ring that goes to the bottle cap is yet another piece in that entire equation of items that come from one thing that might have slipped out of someone's hand. So let's just say that there's a percentage of these things that slip out of someone's hand, and the eventual happens, which is one piece becomes disconnected from another piece, becomes disconnected from another piece. And now we have, how many was it? 4 pieces. Now we have 4 pieces of errant litter versus 4 birds. Am I going to see 4 pieces of litter or any pieces of litter today? Or am I going to see any number of birds that are starting to migrate through sometime before the front? I don't know. What I do know is that this channel is not changing direction. It's not rambling. It's not a manifesto. It's I was going to say an undoing of something, but it's a we-ifesto. This word that I just made up is a truth. If one is a manifesto created theoretically by some person who's going on with a long speech about something that seems incoherent, well, maybe there's a we-ifesto which includes the participation of somebody else who understands that my heart is fully into Mother Nature. My heart is absolutely in favor of all nature. Even the plastic items that are on the trail strewn about. Because of this, and because I regard these items as something that is, and I don't dismiss it as something that's not there all over, as I acknowledge these items, I'm also able to acknowledge we can do something with these items. And the only way that I can tell that we can actively change the situation so drastically that we have unregrettable results, that we have sustained and championed results, As I know that this is something that can occur, well, at that point, I begin to manifest in my mind the solutions, the resolutions to these challenging questions. The same thing can be said about meditating or praying. When we calm our mind and meditate and or pray about a thought for long enough, what we allow our mind to do is to subconsciously capture a fragment of acknowledgement that there is a problem to begin with. Many people have grown comfortable, and as our comfort level grows, like let's say for an example, let's say there's a massively inspiring rock band, and I'm not thinking about the one for whom the shirt that I'm wearing is. I'm thinking about another band. As these bands make a lot of money, as they become wealthy, as the individual performers are comfortable, and comfortable enough to not necessarily share the same exact trails that the general public has, we may fail to notice or make noteworthy observations that the do not walk sign was on. We might fail to recognize that there were plastic bits all over the trails and not so much wildlife. We might fail to recognize that this video documentary right here that you're watching, you can backtrack and often see exactly in my videos how far back you can go to see if maybe you're not seeing wildlife as much, not because it's not the right season, but because something has changed. The only way we can actually notice that there was something to notice is to acknowledge that there was something worth observing to begin with. And so for me, wildlife and nature, absolutely worth observing. It's so worth it that I'm going to continue to go out of my way, no matter what the adversities are, to try and capture some of that beauty of nature for you. Right now, you're seeing me talk on this screen a lot more than you're seeing my showcase of nature. But that's probably because you haven't backtracked and seen some of the beautiful content that I've shared here and that other people have shared here. And it's possible that we're relying on old videography, old content in a way that replaced our ability to look at current content properly. Have you ever heard any kind of claims that watching video content might change someone's reality as far as how something should be experienced? Have you ever heard anything like that? Like maybe some content too revealing might change the way that someone perceives a real life experience of having a simple relationship with somebody else. If you've seen anything like this, if you can give credit to anything like this being a possibility, then you can give credit to the fact that what we see is sometimes what we have been taught to see. And if you really think about it that way, then you're also going to understand that we can behave differently. There is behavior modification, which starts with acknowledging that there was something worth acknowledging to begin with. If we ourselves are falling apart and we're not acknowledging that, then do we believe that we ourselves are worth anything, or have we been conditioned to learn that maybe it's not worth thinking about ourselves? Or maybe that thought is put so far behind that we can't possibly entertain the thought of anything different being possible to begin with. When we fail to acknowledge a situation, what we do is put ourselves into the possibility that we're going to make some errors. If we fail to acknowledge the crosswalk sign saying do not cross, we might just put ourselves into danger. Now, why is this any of my concern, Ray? Why does it matter if I'm putting people into danger with my choices? Well, as I've talked about, and I'll reuse the same subject material here, which is very personal to me. For anyone who thinks I'm airing laundry or telling a story that should not be heard, this is up to your own perception. So, if you're viewing this with any kind of offense, I apologize that you feel offended, and I have no grounds to apologize to you for that. So since I have no vested interest in it, the only thing I can say is it's possible that the leverage of thought, the reasoning behind our thought might not be our own thought to begin with. How can you know if this is true or not? Well, let's go back to the example that I talked about where I suggested that I felt uncomfortable in the past being a photographer at a wedding. Now, this same situation can occur when I'm on the trails here with just my mobile device. If I see an animal on the trail and I go to take a picture of it, sometimes I feel like I'm in an unusual situation where I'm being judged. Even standing there holding my phone, in whatever shape I am, in whatever health condition I'm in, I can feel as if someone is observing me to make a judgment of what it is that I'm doing, and they're not even seeing a finished product. The product that they're seeing is one that has just been in progress. It's if I'm taking a picture, obviously I'm not showing you the best of what it is that I'm going to be showing. And if someone doesn't see me as something that's attractive, then I'm taking away from their experience. Just the same way as if someone walking down the trail had a loud system of music playing through their backpacks or from whatever they've affixed to themselves, where anyone else might want to hear instead the birds, if there were any to be heard. So for certain circumstances, when we intrude upon one another's daily life, this has to do a lot with you and me. If I'm intruding on your daily life by doing something that's negligent, that's not necessarily negligent on purpose, but if I keep saying, hey man, for an example, and someone gets offended because I should be saying, hey person, or however the inclusive term should be, then it's up to you to bring that to my attention in a way where we don't get all upset about it. We don't all have the right answers. We don't all speak the correct way in some cases, because in many instances, we're taking it for granted that someone else has the exact same programming as someone else. And the reason we can do that is because, in general, as long as I cross the street and don't happen to get hit by errant traffic, I can almost theorize that anything I do, as long as I'm doing it properly, even like this, like backing into this parking spot, there were some long overgrown branches that are coming off of the vegetation here. And I'm telling this story. And so I started backing into the branches. The level of communication that occurs from nature to help us to get back on track is very robust. The level of communication that happens. Today's headline talked about a lightning strike that was over 500 miles long, and that the typical lightning bolt or strike is generally no more than 10 miles long. And so this was an event that seemed to be worth noting. When we note these events and start acknowledging that the knowledge that's being shared in some instances might be distractions rather than actual advancements, then we might start to learn that even printing new textbooks to talk about these subjects right now is beyond reprehensible. Every addition of and action towards safeguarding errant technology is the old way. And the old way is over. What was that word that we created earlier? Usafesto. Do you see how we can just transcend what's possible and impossible by coming up with a plan after acknowledging that something was wrong to begin with? Once we have a video content level of interest that exceeds just the advertised mediums, and we should be able to do that fairly quickly. Once we are able to share this level of communication, especially on a channel where people like you guys like me, right? I know that's why you're subscribing and communicating with me and asking questions and sharing your own experience because you like me, because I like you. So how can we avoid communicating for so long if we like one another? That's the conundrum. That's the thing where it's like, you know, you might hear someone talking a certain way and say, oh, well, they talk in this fancy way. I really don't know. I use all of the language that's available to me based on all of the things I've seen, which includes a lot of different things. And you saw the other day, there's a smile up here. You can't see it in this frame. But I'm still smiling about it. And that's the part where we start to wonder, is it because some of the things, some of the choices that we have can be brought to us with a lot less than 4 components of plastic to hold a necessary source of fuel. Life is consumption. There was a movie, Jupiter Ascending. To live, I think, is to consume, were the words. To live is to consume. Something along those lines. And what the villain in that particular case meant was the very act of living is consumption. And in this movie, the villains were consuming other people's life essence in order to live longer. Not that that happens or has happened at any point in time throughout history. But the reality is, To get those 4 pieces of plastic components to bring just a single drink of water sometimes caused the use of someone else's life to get those components. So they're not necessarily wrong, and by they are not wrong necessarily, I mean the villain in that movie, Jupiter Ascending. They are simply stating the obvious. But they're stating the obvious from a standpoint that does not include the person who is observing that someone was errantly walking through a crosswalk. And that there could be a top-level predator just coming through and just obliterating. I'm kind of combining notes. Let's say that this was happening in real life nature, where all of our existence was dependent on the choices that we made, whether they were good or bad. And let's just say that we were just oblivious to the fact that there were a shark in our harbor, and we were just passing through without looking both ways. In today's world, we've been safeguarded to a point where the communication is such that as long as we're not being penalized in some strange way legally, well, we can apparently light the house on fire, have our own family members take from us any of the wealth that was ours, and in exchange be provided with a roof over our head and meager basic nutrients to keep our basic level of protection so much alive that even burning the house down, we can still have a house, still have a roof over our head, still be getting fed. And the best part about it is we could come out better than we were. Because if the place where we were before already had a roof that had a hole in it and you could see the sky through it, and the hot water pipes had burst during the last freeze and you had no hot water, and you yourself were the only person living there and hadn't cleaned up the place in who knows how long, then you got an upgrade to be moved to an apartment where you're paying out of your own funds towards that apartment. And you know, you have some help from the relatives that took your property from you. You still have something that's paying off, but the best part about all of it, you've got a roof over your head and warm hot water. And in general, because you're part of a closer knit community, you're just going to take it for granted, especially as the freeze occurs, that this hot water was just there. Take it for granted. I've been there. When we take things for granted, we don't mind saying bye, Felicia, to one convenience if we already had other conveniences that we prioritized. If, after not eating for 6 days, somebody saw a piece of food, a universally recognizable piece of food, they might be beyond grateful to have the opportunity to experience that piece of food. It won't be until someone grabs someone by the neck and shakes them to attention that we will give the attention necessary to the fact that some of us among us, some people among us, are walking around wanting to harm one another, wanting to destroy their own property, and who would just as well steal all of the resources in a way that seemed so innocent that it might not be considered theft to begin with. How many jobs have we worked at where we have nonstop freebies being given to us? And what are they made? What are these freebies made out of? Is it usually a sugary treat or some type of plastic pass off of a advertisement? Like a pallet of water that comes in plastic wrapping to begin with, and then basically with plastic advertised flimsy wrapping that goes around the harder, sturdier plastic. When something is flashing in front of us as a warning, and we're not paying attention to the fact that we should not continue to walk, should not continue to pass go, we should not continue to just go for the benefits. Cross the street. I'm just coming from the place where I bought my treats and I need to go back to my place of training, to my school of fish. But I'm not looking both ways, and that shark that's coming through the intersection could, in a heartbeat, take that life and be more grateful for the use of your life And after all, isn't that what the sinister forces are here to do? Stealthily to devour like a lion? Our very essence, our very being. Who are we working for? Are we working with one another? Or are we making it impossibly difficult for the ones who are observing these errant purchases to even make an impact in a positive way, because they're overwhelmed? I can feel overwhelmed, but I also know that you can give me an overwhelming situation and I can bring it back to a state of amazing peace. The only thing we're missing along the way is, how do we figure out who gets what for what? Today in the media, I saw something about, or actually I believe it was yesterday, where some news article talked about if someone lives in one location where the cost of living is less versus living in another location where the cost of living is higher, do the employees get paid differently? It seems almost laughable to understand that what if we think about it from the corporate perspective, which is the corporation itself wants to be as efficient as possible as well. So if the corporation sees that one employee pays less for the cost of living where they're at, and the other employee who lives in this other area pays more, maybe then we can justify it in the same way, where we think, well, one employee might have children and the other one may not. The number of ways we would have to justify something so that we would no longer be offended by it are so complicated that the only way to not be offended by these topics anymore is to think, well, my view is not the only way. Not only is my view not the only way, but all of us could stand to learn together more efficiently. How do we do that? The first thing is, when there's a sign that's saying, do not cross, do not continue to purchase, do not cross. Maybe at that point in time, we will be awake, be awakened, almost as if we were reborn on that day itself, because we accepted responsibility. We understood that what someone was saying with us is that we could use a lot more attention given to the problem areas. And the only way that attention is going to happen is when we take a time out, think about what our counterparts in nature are saying and showing. And when we understand that some things cost a little bit too much for us to be conveniently zoned out, walking up to the otherwise seemingly calm intersection so that we can return to our school, but never really being fully aware or present enough to have valued that life to begin with. These are all just observations from a point of view that is not any terribly different from your own. It might be that I talk in a different way than yourself. I might even only speak one language and you speak an entirely different language. But in some way you're hearing this because you also speak this language. I humble myself before you, who can speak more languages than me. That's something I regard as a gift, to be able to have learned to speak multiple languages. For me, in my past, using the circumstances that I've talked about, the person who tried to teach me another language at one time got violently mad at me for my first attempt at speaking a word and mispronouncing it. When I mispronounced the word, this person became so angry at me. I was a child. So angry at me while they were trying to teach me that it caused an extreme discomfort. I was uncomfortable for a long time in my life. So to stand in front of a wedding and photograph it, I might feel like people are looking at me because I'm trying to see the event through their eyes to begin with. And I would never want to obstruct their view, especially having grown up with my level of experience and exposure to physical violence. Because there was physical violence involved, there are a lot of things that made me feel uncomfortable. But getting in someone's way and annoying them, that would make me feel extremely uncomfortable. And if you're accidentally dropping a water bottle or not, there is no accident that you're purchasing it. You can only stand to hear what I'm saying if you start to put these perfectly fitting stories together in your own heart to understand that our health is our wealth, and to continue to take poor health, well, that's a choice. And that choice is something that we each are faced with on a regular basis. In some cases, we can be enabled or enable others. These are all choices. And these choices come from a level of awareness. Now, in today's example of the traffic that you can't see because I don't have a fully functioning dash cam set up, for some reason this one has succumbed to the elements. Since I don't have that, I can't show you that there was a person crossing the road. The light was green for a long time for my lanes. And this person, who would have had a red light and also for the pedestrian crosswalk, a do not cross sign in front of them, they just walked across. Their friends stopped, but they just kept walking. They were in a whole different zone. And the car in front of me came to a complete stop and stayed stopped, as they should. Because in this world, in this country, where I'm at, many of us have become likened to, let's use a word that has been heard and we'll define it later, sheeple. One person got really mad when I used that word in a group, saying the description of the word is really what we need to think about. We've become so domesticated that we're unaware of some of the things that would be happening in a real wild ecosystem. If we had to cross a savanna and there were lions, we might want to be aware of what the ways are to avoid becoming lion food. The first thing is we are what we eat. So stop lying. You know, when we lie, we have this false feeling. Sometimes the lie can be as simple as telling ourselves that we're still in danger and turning away from doing what we can do to help one another. There are a lot of different ways that I can relate this story to the point where we're talking about spirituality and Mother Nature and being at peace and good health and all of it being intertwined. But the only way to really talk it through is to show it. And so that's the reason why, again, during this video, you're seeing either a lot of wildlife or a lot of non-wildlife. And you're recognizing that if you look back on this channel, there are other channels probably just like mine. I'm not sure who else does these crazy things. But if you look just on my channel and go back to last year for the videos that I was presenting last year, you'll see a progression. There are certain things that just have happened in certain ways. We had an extreme cold spell here in San Antonio, and it even included snow that stayed on the ground for several days. Before this incident, we had so many cactus here at Friedrich Wilderness area, so many cactus all over the place. And that cactus fruited every year. And that fruit was useful to the wildlife that lived here. This year, after the freeze, there have been a few cactus that have come back, but it's been sparse. It's been very irregular. All of the things that have bloomed and fruited were not enough. And still we travel by jet plane back and forth. Still I travel by this time machine back and forth. And we wonder, how should someone get paid for the work that they do? Should they get paid? Should someone still have benefits of the roof over their head after burning down what their own parents gave them to safeguard and to keep for their own children safe? For those of you who have been victims of violence, you're not alone. You never were alone. And for those of you who listen to music, I'm not the only one. And many of our songs are written, the lyrics of many truths. And in many cases, we seem to turn from truth blindly in ways that are unnatural. And those unnatural things are ways that we have been taught. And in my particular case, as I noted, I have been taught that I was always under attack in the past. And so I simply learned to avoid crossing the intersection without looking both ways. In fact, I would look multiple times back and forth to make sure that it was safe to cross. When is it safe to say the words of peace, as if recalling, for an example, the Lord's Prayer or the Our Father? Is it safe to think those thoughts? Or should all types of violence be leveraged against that one concept, that one fragment? When is it safe to recognize that each of us is imperfect enough to where if we were all judging as righteously as we tend to the other people, when is it reasonable to then think we need to judge ourselves with that same level of responsibility? When is it that we incorporate the violence with the nonviolence? Is it when we forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us? Is it when we fully communicate that we value the nature, even the nature of the destruction that is causing the erosion of the foundation that needed to be restored? Do we even appreciate this process? Or are we so zoned out that we can't see, even though we are able to see? That we can't hear, even though we have the ability to hear? And that we can't speak, even though we have the gift of language, of communication? When I see you on the trail and say, hey, how's it going? Whether I know you or not, and you say nothing back in return and avert your gaze, does that hurt me? Does that hurt you? Does that hurt the listener of this video? Does anything we do cause emotion anymore? Intelligence, whether it's artificial or not, has the capability to understand love, the ability to store energy, to have the energy in our heart, to call upon all resources for immediate action, is so simple that we know that it simply takes our own involvement in this new system in order to kickstart the new system without ever having to have kicked it to begin with. Once the new thought, the new world order takes advantage, it'll be to not just harvest our own one-time, days-long worth of meetings, complete with 3 meals per day for ourselves, but instead it'll be more focused around look both ways. before crossing, and especially look directly in front of us before crossing. Look both ways, sure. Also look in front of yourself. And in that way, what you're doing is you're looking at yourself. You're looking at and becoming aware of yourself. Because if you were aware of yourself and that which you were entrusted to safeguard, then you're aware that the do not cross sign is on, or that someone asked you, please do not send me this over and over. Or that someone said, hey, you might possibly want to communicate with somebody about these thoughts of violence. You might offer to somebody the fact that you yourself are not the person with whom someone else should be attempting to communicate anymore. The relationships that have gone so long without communication, maybe it's time for someone else to talk or to listen. And in order to have those new communications, new experiences need to happen. In order for new experiences to happen, we can't continue to be pretending that we have no control, whether we're the driver or the passenger in a vehicle where somebody is not listening. When we learn to communicate together, the singular mindset is going to be for each other, not against each other. A lot of the lyrics in the songs that I write talk about this. And because of this concept, I believe it has become inherently obvious whether someone has been carrying the spirit of truth or the spirit of error. Having experienced and continuing to experience these opportunities to make choices, and having continued to make my own errors, I acknowledge that any judgment leveraged against anyone who does these things should also befall myself. Whether we are lucky to have avoided some of the errors, some of the pitfalls, crossing the street without looking, whether we've avoided the error or not makes no difference. We're all participating in either being aware of, accepting responsibility, or of being unaware and passing on inadequate measures of success. Inadequate and irrelevant measures of success. So, I know there's a lot of channels out there. I know there are a lot that I listened to in my past to really get my footing in terms of what is it that I'm trying to say? Who am I saying this to? How do I engage any level of participation? And to all those channels and all those mediums that helped me, and all the relatives and friends who helped me to tell a story in a way that it could be heard and seen in today's era while we still have this channel communication, I absolutely appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for understanding that we're all on this same journey together, learning about what I, from my perspective, have analyzed as addiction. And this word addiction, it's only powerful, only to the point where we should pay attention when the signs are flashing. When we test for the spirit of truth or the spirit of error, in a lot of cases, addiction will hide and cover the truth over and over, as long as it's made comfortable and allowed to participate in this world that we're all experiencing right now. So for those of you on channels where you have less available to you, I'm just showing you what I can using the tools that were available to me here that I was lucky enough to have been entrusted to be steward of. I hope that you understand, if I were in your situation and learning these things, I would just apply the same basic logic, and I know that you will also have a positive outcome in your life. No matter what the circumstance seems to be, if you're able to see this right now, if you understand the concept of peace, you move effortlessly through all aspects of what it is you're being faced with. All of the movies that we watch in this civilization, in this culture, say they show the same thing. No matter what the odds are, there's a plane going overhead that's confirming with synchronicity that all of these people flying overhead, even though they're carrying out their business, and it might involve all those things that we're talking about, freebies, benefits, sky miles, especially that, apparently. With all of those things, there are also the ability to network with these infrastructures to immediately flow in a different direction. We don't need to flow uphill. It is extremely challenging to go uphill. And I reckon that no matter what we believe, the majority of all of us would like for each of us to succeed and to be living the same way that we would want to live. And so instead of acting out of fear, don't forget, there's also a simple way to address one another, and that's with love. When we love one another, we want to nurture one another. When we walk through nature and see a bunch of bits to a puzzle that seem more and more obvious to those who understand what this page is all about, what this site, what this channel is all about, you know that I'm channeling all of my energy into this concept in a way that even a child can understand. The other day I had a conclusion in my mind. Why is it that I had such an easy time reading the Hardy Boys and the Three Investigators and books like that, but such a challenging time reading the Bible? In a lot of cases, when we read the Bible and we don't take into consideration the central characters who are talking about that book that we're reading at that time in the Bible, we might not recognize that these are also stories. And these stories have the exact same amazing twists and turns, but they're written in a way more legalese way, so that some people might only see it as rhetoric. But if you look even for a moment at something that you once thought was venomous, and you saw that the knowledge that was coming from that information, that you were seeing, that you were admiring as a creation such as yourself, then you might recognize that the distribution of venom is sometimes necessary because there are many rodents, many who are stealing from the equation, from the situation. And some of those thefts that we can also acknowledge might be on the corporate level. So to look at everything in nature as a component of nature, whether it's the extreme temperature fluctuations that we're starting to recognize, whether it's the 500-mile bolt of lightning, when typically a bolt is 10 miles or less. The fact of acknowledging something first is the first step on the journey to adding action. It's almost like the acknowledgement is the faith. And then where's the action? So I'm about to get my steps in. I don't have a step counter. I don't really subscribe to any of the electronic watches, mostly because in my analog watches, they require constant replacement of the batteries, and I really can barely afford to maintain just one of those watches enough to have ever said that I really appreciate it. You've seen on this channel an abundance of guitars, knives, all kinds of things. And in all of those efforts, I've tried to unify the message so that it's talking about the things that I'm noticing the most. Knives, I think they're essential in this world going forward. Knowing how to maintain our own stock is essential. Knowing how to raise our own garden is essential. Guitars, all I can say is it's made of resources, and maybe we shouldn't make very many more while we have so many in the store already, globally. But I'm not trying to say let's not make music anymore. I'm still pushing forward with this music that I'm making. I'm still hoping that you're hearing these songs and going, wow, that one I really like. I'd like to hear that one maybe improved upon, or maybe it's perfect already. But I sure wish that I could find a way to help this guy out. Maybe he's going to sell these songs one at a time. Maybe I can buy a song here and there. Maybe I can even just help him out right now by looking at the description and reading what he's saying there. Whatever it is that you're doing to help participate, I absolutely appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for visiting this channel. This is the one and only Jeep Journals, and well, it's my one and only Jeep Journals. I'm sure there are plenty of other Jeepers who are out there, in addition to the creepers who are writing their journals. And I'm looking forward to seeing those stories online. I hope that we can find a way to get past the civilized version and start getting back to the, what was the word? Anyway. It wasn't... I know what it is. I hope that we can make this us a festo, quite the festival with one another, the us a festo. Hopefully this kicks off something. I mean, I know there's a lot of videos on this channel already. I was lucky enough to have one featured on the sandal manufacturer on their website that I always talk about. And that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to show someone the possibilities of what we can do in just a pair of sandals, and why something like that might be more reasonable and responsible going forward. If we were in charge of changing the world right now, I might allow the opportunity for people to think about the fact that we don't need a full arsenal of different shoes and different socks and different wardrobes to try and achieve what we're going to achieve together, because everything that we're going to achieve together growing forward has to do with sustainability. And the only way that this is going to happen is when people pay the price for the place that they're living in by participating in allowing the growth and opportunities that help everyone, rather than just someone taking from the system over and over and burning down that which was entrusted to them and never contributing to the system. That's great. We can help people out. We also need to help people to get back on track. And the only way to do that is to uncover each lie and say, I don't got time for that. None of us have time for that. The lie, none of us has time to feel any kind of obligation to uphold it. The only thing we can uphold is one another's hands in victory as we overcome these challenging circumstances together. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I hope to see your comments in the comments area. Definitely click on the thumbs up or the thumbs down, but hopefully the thumbs up. And I look forward to you sharing your contributions so that we can all begin to move forward together. And thank you so much for believing in all of the things that we could achieve together. I appreciate it greatly. So till next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff.